Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or the Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, we're going to be breaking down 5 wide receivers that I can't stop drafting in 2024 fantasy football. 5 wide receivers that in the early drafts that I have been doing, I have been taking a ton. But before we could get into things, I would like to ask that if you guys are new to the channel and you do end up enjoying today's video, then please make sure to hit that subscribe button down below. And while you're down there, whether you are new to the channel or not, please make sure they do leave a like on today's video. It would help me out a ton. If you want to follow me on Twitter or X, please do so at NotoriousFantasy. So without further ado, let's get into 5 wide receivers I can't stop drafting in 2024 fantasy football. We begin with the first wide receiver that I can't stop drafting, and that is going to be Brandon Aiyuk of the San Francisco 49ers. Current underdog ADP wide receiver 12 at pick 17.6. Aggregate ADP from ESPN Sleeper, MFL, NFFC, and Fantrax have him at pick number 20. So if you're doing a best ball draft on underdog, Brandon Aiyuk typically goes in the middle of the second round, whereas on the other websites, he goes later on in the second round. Now, Brandon Aiyuk is someone that I talked about in yesterday's video when I was discussing Deebo Samuel as a guy that really does scare me to draft in 2024. And one of the reasons why I am scared of Deebo Samuel is because of the fact that I believe that Brandon Aiyuk is the better wide receiver than Deebo Samuel. Brandon Aiyuk is an incredibly efficient wide receiver. Last season, he ranked 3rd in yards per route run, 2nd in yards per target, 2nd in yards per reception, and 9th in true catch rate on an offense that I project to be, yet again, one of the best offenses in the entire National Football League. And Brandon Aiyuk, when you compare him to Deebo Samuel, is going to be the guy seeing more targets, and he is going to be the guy that is a lot more consistent. While Deebo Samuel might have the bigger spike game this season where he scores 30 points, right? Puts his balls on the forehead of the defense, has 150 yards and a touchdown or 2, has that huge game. Brandon Aiyuk is much more consistent, and Brandon Aiyuk also has that huge spike week upside because of the offense that he plays in, as well as the fact that the guy runs very crisp routes. He is always able to get open. He's like a Waffle House, all right? Brandon Aiyuk right now, to me, feels like a very safe pick that also has a ton of upside. Now, the elephant in the room would be the fact that Brandon Aiyuk still has not put his John Hancock down on the paper and signed a new contract. There's talks about a potential holdout. There's talks about a potential trade. Now, I do not believe that a trade is going to occur that is going to ship Brandon Aiyuk off of the 49ers and to a team like the Pittsburgh Steelers. People have talked about how the Steelers want Brandon Aiyuk, and it makes sense because Brandon Aiyuk looks like Mike Tomlin's fucking clone from the multiverse. If you don't know, look up a picture of Mike Tomlin, look up a picture of Brandon Aiyuk. They look eerily similar. But at the end of the day, I do not believe a trade is going to happen here for Brandon Aiyuk, and I believe he will ultimately sign a contract with the 49ers. I love Kyle Shanahan. I love the plays that he draws up offensively. I like the fact that they have a solid offensive line. I like the fact that Brock Purdy is a solid starter at the National Football League level. It makes me feel incredibly confident in Brandon Aiyuk. And again, while we talk about how Deebo Samuel is kind of the spike game king at the wide receiver position, one of the better spike game players, that also comes with the topsy-turviness, right? The roller coaster ride of, hey, Deebo Samuel scored 30 points, and then the next week he turns into Deebo Scamuel because he scammed your ass, and now he scored 0.4 fantasy points. Aiyuk is a lot safer while also having that same upside. Wide receiver 14 last year in PPR, 15 in PPR points per game, 16 games played. He had 105 targets, 6.6 per game, number 30 at wide receiver, 75 receptions, 4.7 per game, 24th, 1,342 receiving yards, 83.9 per game, 7th at wide receiver, and 7 total touchdowns, 18th at wide receiver. The touchdown number is one of the least sticky numbers in the NFL, right? We know guys that are going to produce targets, receptions, yards, but the total touchdown number is incredibly volatile. Unless You're like Julio Jones, who was just allergic to the end zone, and you knew he wasn't going to be scoring a lot of touchdowns. So Brandon Aiyuk, I think if he sees a couple more targets, which I project is going to be the case, he might end up scoring some more touchdowns, and you would be incredibly excited to have drafted Brandon Aiyuk in the second round. Again, one of the most efficient wide receivers in the NFL, third in yards per route run, second in yards per target, second in yards per reception, and ninth in true catch rate. I love Brandon Aiyuk here in San Francisco for 2024 fantasy football. At number 2, we got Wiki DJ Moore of the Chicago Bears. Current underdog ADP wide receiver 21 at pick 28.6. Aggregate ADP got him as pick 31. Now, DJ Moore is a player that seems to be kind of polarizing in fantasy football because while they brought in much better quarterback play in Caleb Williams, in my opinion, compared to Tyson fucking Bagent and what we saw out of Justin Fields last season, the fact that they drafted Rome Odunze and the fact that they brought in Keenan Allen has been a worry for some fantasy football players, right? How will DJ Moore fare in this offense with much better competition, right? In the past, we were seeing Amon-Ra St. Brown's brother, Equimania St. Brown, be the competition for DJ Moore, right? We're seeing Darnell, here comes the Mooney, being the competition for DJ Moore, whereas now he has a prospect that is amazing in Rome Odunze and an amazing veteran wide receiver in Keenan Allen, who to me still has a little bit of juice left in the tank. And that is what scares people. They start to worry that DJ Moore is going to get his targets siphoned from him. And in reality, I do not believe that is going to be the case. And I think people are sleeping big time on DJ Moore when he's coming off the board as the wide receiver 21. And I believe he is going to finish as a top 12 wide receiver. He was the wide receiver 6 last year in PPR and the wide receiver 9 in PPR points per game. He played in 17 total games. He had 136 targets, 8 per game, 14th at wide receiver, 96 receptions, 5.6 per game, 12th, 1,364 receiving yards, 80.2 per game, number 6, and 9 total touchdowns, 10th at wide receiver. If you look at his numbers, if Aiyuk was able to score a couple more touchdowns based upon how they had a similar amount of yards. Now, we did see DJ Moore with a lot more receptions. You can see how things could easily go Aiyuk's way, and he could finish much higher than his ADP as the wide receiver 12. Now, DJ Moore is going even later as the wide receiver 21, and I believe that Caleb Williams is going to unlock this offense. Now, I'm not going to sit here and just give the gawk 9,000 special to Caleb Williams. I like Caleb Williams a ton, and I am not going to sit here and say that Caleb Williams in year number 1 is a guarantee to completely turn the Bears around and make them a perennial playoff team year in and year out, right? In year number 1, I'm not going to sit here and guarantee you that they make the playoffs. But what I will tell you is that Caleb Williams is levels above Justin Fields. He is levels above Tyson Bagent. Before last season, it would have been like Conor McGregor. You would have said, who the fuck is that guy when you're thinking about Tyson Bagent? Because no one knew who he was. And he was able to have DJ Moore have huge performances. Last season, DJ Moore was 4th in dominator rating and 8th in contested catch percentage. While I fully understand there's some reason to be a little bit nervous about Keenan Allen and Rome Odunze there, I am not going to worry. I'm going to believe in the talent of DJ Moore. I'm going to believe that he is still the best wide receiver on this team. And let's be completely honest. Let's call a spade a spade. I'm not saying Keenan Allen's going to fall off the edge of the earth, but he's 1 year older. He's getting to the age where that could happen. Rome Odunze is a rookie, and while we've seen a lot of rookie wide receivers recently really come out the gate on fire, come out jump street rock solid, that's not a guarantee. So as long as Caleb Williams is halfway competent, I think DJ Moore smashes Hulk style in 2024. At number 3, we got Zay Flowers of the Baltimore Ravens. Underdog ADP wide receiver 25 at pick 35.7. Aggregate ADP has him much later at pick 51. The reason behind that is on Underdog, drafters are addicted to drafting the wide receiver position a lot earlier, whereas in your more casual leagues, your at-home league, you're going to be seeing a lot more running backs fly off the board, even if we as a fantasy football community are starting to draft wide receivers a lot more early, right? There are a lot of people going into maybe just drafting one running back in the first 4 rounds, which would have been unheard of a couple of years ago. Even if a lot of players are doing that, Underdog just takes it to another level of drafting wide receivers super early. So I think that in your at-home league, you're going to be able to get Zay Flowers around pick 50, which is what the aggregate ADP says right now. Now, Zay Flowers last year was the wide receiver 31 in PPR and the wide receiver 32 in PPR points per game, having a relatively solid rookie season. Wide receiver 31 is nothing to write home about, right? I'm not going to sit here and wax poetically about Zay Flowers' rookie season saying he had the best stats of all fucking time. But as a rookie in that Baltimore Ravens offense that likes to run the ball, I think that is pretty solid. 16 games played with 16 starts, 108 targets, 6.8 per game. Number 26 at wide receiver, 77 receptions, 4.8 per game. Number 22, 858 receiving yards, 53.6 per game. Number 33, and 6 total touchdowns, 27th. In terms of efficiency, though, that is where I start to really fall in love with Zay Flowers here. 7th in target separation, 6th in route win rate. So Zay Flowers is a guy that is able to get that separation from the DBs. He is able to get open, and that is obviously very important in order for you to catch the ball because you're open, and in order for Lamar Jackson to trust Zay Flowers. He also ranked 18th in terms of snap share, which I think is very important as a rookie to finish that high because the Baltimore Ravens and Harbaugh really trust Zay Flowers. Now, the team still has Rashad Master Bateman. They still have Mark Andrews. And while I am a Rashad Bateman truther deep down in my heart, and while there has been a bit of a drumbeat about, Rashad Bateman this, Rashad Bateman that, at the end of the day, Zay Flowers is the number 1 wide receiver on this team. I get they bring in Derrick Henry and want to run the ball. You'd be absolutely foolish if you thought that now the Baltimore Ravens are going to become some fucking Cliff Kingsbury air raid offense. That's not what they are going to become. You, again, would be foolish to believe so. But Zay Flowers as the number 1 wide receiver on the Ravens, we've seen the upside. We've seen that this guy can play ball. We saw it deeper into last season. We saw it in the NFL playoffs. In that game against the Chiefs, if he did not make that egregious mistake, I think Zay Flowers' ADP would be even higher right now, right? If he doesn't have that mess up that ultimately shoots the team in the foot, now, nothing is really the reason why you lose in the playoffs, right? You can't just be like, that one play is what really lost in the game, guaranteed, right? Because there's a bunch of plays during the game where maybe someone drops the ball or Lamar misses by half of an inch, and that ends up being a incompletion. There's a defenses missing tackles, things like that, right? So it's not the sole reason why they lost, but it was a big reason why they lost that game, right? But Zay Flowers looked great in that game besides that. I think there's going to be an offense that's tremendous, yet again, scoring a shit ton of points, game in and game out. While a lot of people like to make fun of Lamar Jackson, the passer, Lamar Jackson's a running back, this, that, and the other thing. Don't hear that, yada, yada, yada. All right, Zay Flowers in this offense, I think is going to produce. He's being crafted right now outside the top 24 at the wide receiver position, and I believe he will be a wide receiver 2 this season that has those huge spike games due to how great this Ravens offense is. At number 4, we move to Calvin Ridley of the Tennessee Titans. Underdog ADP, wide receiver 36 at pick 61.6. Aggregate ADP has him as pick number 79. If you guys have enjoyed thus far, make sure you guys hit that subscribe button down below. And while you're down there, whether you are new to the channel or not, make sure you leave a like on today's video. It would help me out a ton. So, Calvin Ridley. People are going to hear the name Calvin Ridley, and they're going to think, P. Willikers, Calvin Ridley absolutely railed me last season. Calvin Ridley absolutely fucked me in the ass, and that is why I lost last season, right? It's only Calvin Ridley's fault, right? It's nothing else that happened to my team. It was just Calvin Ridley. That's why I lost, right? And I get it, right? You got burned. You got reamed by Calvin Ridley. But all things considered, sure, Calvin Ridley was a bust. Out of, I think, huge proportions, but he was certainly a bust, okay? It wasn't like when you haven't believed yourself in like 2 weeks and it shoots out like a fucking water gun. That's not the kind of bust that Calvin Ridley was, but obviously if you drafted him, you were disappointed. Wide receiver 18 in PPR, 28 in PPR points per game on the Jaguars. Now, if you go back and watch the tape, it's a little bit frustrating because there was a lot of points where if Calvin Ridley just drug his toe, or if Calvin Ridley was 0.02 milliseconds further up the field or a little bit further back with his hands, there's a lot of touchdowns that were left off the board. There's a lot of big catches, big plays that were left off the board because of faults of Ridley and of touchdown Jesus Trevor Lawrence. So, again, was Calvin Ridley worth your pick last year? The answer would be fuck no, baby, right? 17 games played, 136 targets, 8 per game, 14th at wide receiver. 76 receptions, 4.5 per game, 23rd. 1,016 receiving yards, 59.8 per game, 24th. 8 total touchdowns, 11th. The most quiet 75 plus reception, 1,000 plus receiving yards, and 8 touchdown season you have ever heard. Because there are going to be people that sound off in the comment section before listening to what I say, and they will think that Calvin Ridley was a certified bum last year, and they're not going to touch him again. Now, I will note, hey, again, some of this was Trevor Lawrence's fault. Not at all. Not the whole thing. Calvin Ridley missed on a couple plays. Remember that Calvin Ridley hasn't really played in a couple of years before last season, right? There was the suspension. There was shit with the Atlanta Falcons. Who knows what was really going on behind the scenes, but yeah, that was his first real year back in a while. Was he amazing? Obviously not, but 51st in target accuracy isn't the best. He was 8th in air yards, 20th in dominator rating. Now, the Tennessee Titans are a team that, off the top of your head, if you're thinking Titans, that's a run-heavy team. That's Derrick Henry, Vrabel, Tannehill, hand the rock off, and Derrick Henry just literally runs you over, right? It's like a truck, like fucking the Optimus Prime truck, and it just runs you over and all game long, and they win that way. But now the Titans have former Bengals offensive coordinator Brian Callahan as their new head coach. So I don't think that former super run-heavy offense is what's going to occur in Tennessee. Now, obviously, they're going to run the ball with Tony Pollard. They're going to run the rock with Tajay Spears. But I think this is going to be an offense that leans much more into the pass compared to last season and in the past under Mike Vrabel with Derrick Henry, Tractorcito there. Will Levis, say what you want about his game. He was a rookie last year, right? So I'm not going to write him off. I'm not going to, based on what I saw last season, say he's amazing. I think Will Levis has a bit of dog in him. I think Will Levis is going to be a fine quarterback in this system. I think Calvin Ridley is better than DeAndre Hopkins. I think Calvin Ridley will be the number one target on this team. And as the wide receiver 36, I'm going to take shots on Calvin Ridley. Pick 61 on underdog, 79 on aggregate ADP. Final wide receiver that I can't stop drafting, and that is going to be Rashee Rice, baby. Dun, 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 dun. Kansas City Chiefs wide receiver, underdog ADP wide receiver 47 at pick 79.7. If you guys are new to Underdog Fantasy, you've heard me talk about them before. If you want to get drafting right now, your friends don't want to do a redraft league in June, make sure you head on over to Underdog Fantasy, link in the video description, and you can claim your special pick plus up to $250 if you're a first-time depositor using promo code Notorious or by clicking on the link in the video description. If you have a gambling problem, make sure you call 1-800-GAMBLER, and we are going to be doing a bunch of best ball drafts on that platform throughout the summer. We are going to be streaming them, so you guys can join in with me. So if you're new, why not sign up right now? There are tons of contests on there, and they even have a contest called Best Ball Mania where you can win over $1 million if you come in first place. So at number 5, we got Rashee Rice. Now, Rashee Rice was a guy that if you asked me a couple of weeks ago, I would have said, I am not touching Rashee Rice with a 10-foot pole. I would duck and cover away from Rashee Rice. And I felt like Rashee Rice was a huge fucking landmine that people were just stepping on, right? In the forest of Vietnam, you fucking walk the wrong way, your foot's in a trap, and your foot's getting severed by some bamboo and you're done for. That's how I felt about him. But the more I started to think about it, the more I started to think it's June 11th and Rashee Rice still hasn't been suspended. Now, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I am a lawyer, that I am all knowing that I know for sure what the suspension length is going to be for Rashee Rice. But there's a chance Rashee Rice right now isn't suspended this season. We could see a Alvin Kamara situation where, hey, we know he did it. We know Rashee Rice did it, but it gets pushed to the next season. And even if he does end up getting that suspension, it might not be as long of a suspension as you think it should be. Roger Goodell works in strange ways. You might think, based upon what Rashee Rice did, throw the fucking book at him, 6 to 8 games, he might not get that. Might get 2 games, might get 4 games, might get suspended for a half, right? Like they used to do in college football, Johnny Manziel style, right? So we'll see. We shall see. But right now, as wide receiver 47, especially in best ball drafts, I'm just going to keep drafting him there because I think he is still the number 1 receiver in Kansas City. Today, it came out, or yesterday as you're watching this, that in these early processes of these practices, these camps, Rashee Rice was getting fed today. The most targets on the team. Saw towards the end of last season, Patrick Mahomes really concentrated on Rashee Rice. Wide receiver 27 last year in PPR, 29 in PPR points per game, but he only had 8 starts last season, 16 games played. 102 targets, 6.4 per game, number 33. 79 receptions, 4.9 per game, 18th. 938 receiving yards, 58.6 per game, 28th. 7 total touchdowns, 18th. Efficiency, though, very efficient, especially for a rookie wide receiver. Second in target accuracy. Obviously, when Patrick Mahomes is throwing you the ball, that shit's going to be accurate, right? It's not going to be wobbling like some ass in a strip club, okay? Third in target separation, 10th in yards per route run, 7th in fantasy points per route run, 16th in route win rate. Again, towards the end of last season is when we started to see the true emergence of Rashee Rice. Sure, he was getting action all season long. He was getting targets, he was catching the ball, scoring touchdowns, but he was never really getting the full committal of the offense. Weeks 1 through 11, he only has 1 game with 5 or 2 games with 5 or more receptions. Most of the games in that range, 3 or 4 receptions. But at the end of the season, from weeks 12 through 17, 8 targets against the Raiders, 8 targets against the Packers, 7 against the Bills, 9 against the Patriots, 6 against the Raiders, 5 against the Bengals. He rips off in that range 24 PPR points, 14, 18, 24, 11, 17. Now, Hollywood Brown, Xavier Worthy, they throw a wrench into things, and we all know that Patrick Mahomes loves to spread the ball around. We talked about this in yesterday's video, a reason why I'm a little bit nervous about Xavier Worthy getting drafted right now ahead of Rashee Rice. Worried about him because of that. He likes to spread the ball around. But we already know that when the push came to shove, when the tough got going, when the games start to fucking matter, Mahomes started to trust Rashee Rice as a rookie. So imagine if he's getting those 7-8 targets reliably all season long. Now, they still have Kelsey, and Kelsey said he's ready to take on this huge load. If you read his quote, he sounds like fucking Mia Malkova before a shoot with fucking Johnny Sins. But I still think that Rashee Rice is going to be the number 1 guy here. I still like Hollywood Brown at ADP. I am completely off of Xavier Worthy. And if Rashee Rice ends up having that true breakout season, even if he's suspended for 4 or 5 games, I think you're still ending up with a steal again as the wide receiver 47 off the board. And if he gets suspended, in a lot of leagues, you can just put him in your IR spot. After the draft, you just put him on the IR spot and pick someone else up. That could be useful for those times when he is locked up. Don't let me out. Shout out to Akon. So thank you guys all so much for watching. If you ended up enjoying today's video, make sure that you guys hit that subscribe button down below. Whether you're new to the channel or not, make sure you guys leave a like on today's video. It would help me out a ton. If you want to follow me on Twitter or X, please do so at NotoriousFantasy. Check out one of the videos on your screen if you haven't seen them already. I love you guys all so much. Hope you have a great one. See you tomorrow with another banger of a video. Love you guys. As always, good boy.